Hey everyone, it's Lexi. So in today's video, I'll be sharing with you all the books that I ended up reading in January and books I plan on reading in February as well. But I really hit the ground running with 2026 with reading. I feel like 2025 was a bit of a meh year. Like I just never really I felt like it was just a year-long reading slump, but I feel like I finally have kind of gotten my groove back with reading and really fallen in love with it as well. So I read a total of 8 books, which is crazy. There were a few audiobooks mixed in because I'm still in my puzzling addiction era where I will listen to an audiobook and puzzle at the same time. So I kind of get two birds with one stone. And all the books here are kind of all over in genre as well. For the most part, I really enjoyed all of them, and we have our first 5-star book of the year as well. But I read kind of Regency era, nonfiction, like historical fiction, fantasy, all these things. So we're kind of all over in terms of genre. So without further ado, let's get started. First up, I have The Beautiful Ones by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. This is one book that I was really excited to dive into. It's a little bit different than what she has done in the past, which tends to lead a little bit more into the horror. This is kind of like Regency romance mixed in with like very, very little fantastical elements, but we follow this girl named Nina who has come to the city to, find a significant other, but she's kind of interesting because she doesn't really care too much about it. She's a little bit odd by society standards, and she comes from this really rich family. Her cousin is the one that's kind of the head of the family, and he's really supportive of her, and his wife does not like Nina at all, and Nina's a little bit peculiar too because she has like this power that lets her kind of move objects around and stuff, and she ends up falling for this man who has a connection with her, I guess like her cousin-in-law basically, and it kind of goes from there. This, I would say, if you're a fan of Bridgerton and the tropes and themes that are in that series, I feel like this is kind of pretty spot on with that. You get a lot of the same like tropes that I feel like pop up in Bridgerton, so that was really fun, and it's much more family-friendly version of Bridgerton, if that makes sense. I did have some issues. I really loved like the last 30 pages or so, but I really had issues with some of the pacing. I felt like it could have been a lot shorter, especially for the first bit of the book. Like really not a lot happens, and then there'd be chapters where, a lot of things happen and then nothing for a bit, but it wasn't really till like the last like little bit of the book where things started to pick up and become interesting. So I felt like this could have been a little bit shorter. It's already like fairly short as it is, but it was a little bit predictable, and again had some pacing issues, but I really enjoyed that last part of the book, which was really fun. So it was kind of a more not as spicy version of Bridgerton, if you may call it that. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't fantastic or amazing, but it was just a solid fun read. Next up, I picked up The Look by Michelle Obama. This is her newest book, where she talks about how when she first became public, a public figure with being the first lady, no one really knew who she was, and she didn't really have control of how people viewed her or how a lot of what people were writing about her related to her looks, and what was she wearing, her hair, all these things. And so how she used that to kind of show who she was. So how she used her fashion, how she styled herself as a way to raise awareness to up and coming people of color, like fashion designers or jewelry makers and all those things, and how she learned to eventually not care what people think, especially leaving the presidency and just kind of wearing what she wants. I think Michelle Obama is just so inspiring, and so anything that she writes I will read, and I think she's just had a very interesting life. And so yeah, I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars, and it was interesting, and I liked learning about the clothes, and it's just like all the thought that goes into this, I would not want that at all. Next, I finished an audiobook for when I was puzzling, and it is The Demon of Unrest by Erik, Larson. This is a kind of nonfiction book talking about the series of events that led up to ultimately the Civil War. This one I think is really interesting, and he kind of starts with the book talking about how when he was writing this, the events of January 6th, the insurrection, and I guess even now reading this kind of with the state of way things are in America right now, it's very harrowing to see what's going on and how a lot of these events are very parallel and eerily similar to the tensions and stuff that led to essentially the beginning of the Civil War, like the small little trickles that have ultimately led to kind of the flood that resulted in this war. So it was really interesting. I didn't really like the voice of the narrator for this audiobook, but that's not any critique on the book itself. I thought it was very informative. I've read a lot of his books, and he does a really good job at integrating a lot of personal accounts or primary sources of people's diary entries, letters, all these things to really get a capture or image of what these people were like in this time period. And yeah, so it doesn't read like you're reading a history book, but rather it gives you more of a kind of take on it reads like you're kind of reading a novelization of what was happening. So I've always really enjoyed these books, and so I gave this one a 4 out of 5 stars. Next, I ended up picking up A Resistance of Witches by Morgan Ryan. This is her debut novel, and I was first interested in this book because I saw it was one of the Goodreads nominated fantasy or something books, and so I was interested to kind of dive in. The premise was really intriguing, but we follow this girl named Lydia who is a witch and in Britain during World War II, and throughout history the witches have really kind of kept to themselves and been isolated from British society and what the British government is working on. But with World War II, they offer up their services to basically kind of help fight in the war effort, and they are specifically looking for this artifact book that has a book of spells that the Germans are looking into that can help eradicate a lot of people at the same time, and so it kind of relies on that. So it's a good blend of historical fiction mixed with fantastical elements. But this was my first 5-star read of the year. This book really blew me away. It is a very excellent debut. I'm looking at my notes here. It was fast paced. It had really complex, great characters, and I just really enjoyed kind of all the things that they had to go through, especially because we had the historical context of what was going on at this time kind of tied in with the fantastical elements. It added this layer of familiarity where we know Hitler, we know all these other key figures, Winston Churchill, all these things. So it was really interesting hearing those historical people pop up or discussed about in this thing. So it was really interesting. I haven't really been engrossed in a novel like this in a really long time, so I flew through this. I couldn't put down. All I wanted to do was read this book, and I think that's a testament to how well written it was, how great the characters were. The pacing was just fantastic, and I did not want this to end. So like I said, I gave this a 5 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend you check this one out. My next audiobook was Cinder by Marissa Meyer. I was really kind of feeling nostalgic basically, and I know the narrator for these audiobooks does a really fantastic job. I read the Lunar Chronicles when they were booktube royalty 10 years ago, and it's been long enough that I remember some of the details, but for the most part some of the stuff I just totally forgot, and I was this will be a fun one to listen to while puzzling. Yeah, I just enjoyed it as much as the first time. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was fun. It's a little bit more, obviously skews a little bit more towards older YA, but not the YA that is, or new adults, that kind of the blurry line. It's nice just to have a light-hearted fun kind of romance where it's not too intense, and something a little bit more PG, which I enjoy. So I really enjoyed this audiobook, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. I ended up picking up the Curious History of Irish Dogs by David Blake Knox, and this talks about the 7 or so dog breeds that are native to Ireland, and really talking about their history of how a lot of some of these breeds are really tied to Irish history. So that was really interesting how especially during kind of the tensions that were in the early 1900s between Britain and Ireland, how some dogs were viewed as bougie, and these ones were more for the working class, true Irish people. So how these dog breeds, a lot of their popularity was tied to historical events or all these things, and it was really interesting. It was really informative. I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It was really interesting, and especially the last section of this book. I'm really tumbling over my words there, but the last section of this book talking about how important dogs are to our lives, and how we watch them age throughout the entire their entire life, and all that stuff made me teary-eyed because I do love dogs so much. But it was just really interesting, and it makes you just think about certain dog breeds, and like you don't realize how intertwined they, like, certain breeds are to a culture or a nation or events. So it was very interesting to kind of learn about that, and made me like kind of think how breeds like become popular and all these things. And it's fun too because I got this when we were on our honeymoon. We went to the Winding Stair in Ireland, and basically they have a restaurant on top, so we had our Valentine's Day dinner, so we did some book shopping and that, so it's nice to have like a fun memory tied to this book, and I did learn a lot of stuff, so it's very interesting. My next audiobook was Scarlet by Marissa Meyer. This I remember being my least favorite of the like Lunar Chronicle books, just because I don't like Scarlet as a character, so I gave this one a 3 out of 5 stars. I enjoy the other characters minus Scarlet and Wolf. I think my biggest one for this one is just that it is so insta-lovey, and I think now looking this at when I'm like, you know, married, and reading this now like when I'm married and all that stuff, how insta-lovey it is and like toxic their relationship is a little bit, and I just think Scarlet is just so like tempered, and point where she just acts like so brashly and like doesn't think, and like there's consequences for her actions. I just don't like her personality. So again, I remember this being my least favorite of the series. I still give it a 3 out of 5 stars, but again, I just don't like Scarlet. And lastly, the last book that I read this month was Pearly Everlasting by Tammy Armstrong. I felt like this was the perfect book to read when we had the huge snowstorm that took over like the entire East Coast, and we have like 2 feet of snow right now, so I think it's very, very fitting with like the bitter cold and the snow. So I was like, this is the perfect time to read this one. But it takes place in the 1930s in New Brunswick in Canada, and we follow Pearly Everlasting, who is a little bit of an odd girl. Her family works in kind of this lumber camp, and she ended up being raised alongside this bear cub who was you know, abandoned, and they raised it as if it were their brother, but it's basically kind of just a pet. But when a kind of misunderstanding and involving murder takes place, the bear Bruno is kidnapped, and she kind of goes on this journey to find him. This one was very peculiar and heartbreaking. It was really interesting. I think the writing of the bond between Pearly Everlasting and Bruno, and just that bond, I think is very, like, I think anyone who has like a pet or like, you know, a dog or cat or something where they're really bonded to can relate to. And like there was there were things like just in terms of like, I'd be like, oh, like if Willow, our dog, was feeling that, like I was getting upset reading about it and like anxious, because I don't like it when animals suffer at the hands of human stupidness, or just humans in general. So like there was parts where I was like a little bit anxious reading it, so that's just a trigger warning if you don't like that in books or in media or anything like that. Like I do find that hard to read. But I think it had some pacing issues. It could have been shorter. I feel like for the first 100 pages, really not a lot happens until Bruno is taken, and then there was just a lot of things that I think could have been edited out. So again, I did really enjoy this story. I loved the kind of themes of the bonds we have with nature and animals and all these things, but I felt like it could have been maybe 50 pages shorter or so. So yeah, it was just a little bit, you know, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't, you know, amazing. So I gave this a 3 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really interesting, unique, and I don't think I've really read anything like this, but again, I think it could have been maybe just a little bit shorter. Alright, so let's move on to the books that I plan to read in February. For audiobooks, I'm just going to continue on with the Lunar Chronicles. So I'm currently making my way through Cress as I've been puzzling, so I'll kind of just probably make my way through this series just kind of over the next few months or so, because I know the books get bigger. Like Cress, I remember, is significantly bigger than Cinder and Scarlet, so I think it might take me a little bit longer to get through. But next up, the book that I'm currently reading right now is The Hallmarked Man by Robert Galbraith. This is the newest installment in the Cormoran Strike series, and me and my sister love this series. She read this not too long ago, and she's like, you need to read it so we can discuss. So I'm reading it now because I was like, I read so many books in January that I have like a good like head start on my 50 book goal for 2026, so I was like, I can kind of focus some on some bigger books this month. And this book follows Robin and Cormoran, who are private detectives who are hired by this kind of somewhat mentally unstable woman who is convinced that her partner was misidentified, who's gone missing, is actually a man that was found brutally murdered in like a jewelry vault, and it kind of goes from there. I'm just very curious because my sister had really strong opinions on things, like she didn't spoil anything, so I'm very curious to see what I think about it. But yeah, if Robin and Cormoran don't add up in this one, I think I've been saying this now for like since book 3, then I will be mad, but at least I can vent with my sister who's read this. So I'm about a quarter of the way through. I usually read these despite them being quite chunky, like this one is like 900 pages. Despite this one being very chunky, I do tend to read through them fairly quickly. Next, this is one that I've been waiting to read during winter, and I feel like because we've had so much snow and it's been so freezing, I feel like this one just seems like it will be the perfect fit, and it is The Spy Coast by Tess Gerritsen. This, I really have loved her Brazilian Isles series. It's really what really got me into crime series, and then this one's kind of like her newest series, which is thriller based, but it just seems so interesting. So it says, former spy Maggie came to the seaside village of Purity, Maine, eager to put the past behind her after a mission went tragically wrong. These days she's living quietly on her chicken farm, still wary of blowback from the events that forced her early retirement. But when a body turns up in Maggie's driveway, she knows it's a message from former foes who haven't forgotten her. Maggie turns to her local circle of old friends, all retirees from the CIA, to help uncover the truth about who is trying to kill her and why. This martini club of former spies may be retired, but they still have a few useful skills that they're eager to use again, if only to spice up their rather sedate new lives. So I think this one just seems really interesting, and I do, again, like I feel like just the cover here really matches the vibes that we are currently having right now with winter. So I was like, this will be the perfect time to read it, and it's a little bit shorter than some of the other books on this list, so I was like, it can be a good palate cleanser, if you will. Next, I have The Fallen and the Kiss of Dust by Carissa Broadbent. This is the second book in the Shatterborn duology, basically, and this is a spin-off series to her like Serpent and Wings of Night duology. So they're all kind of connected within the same world, but it's a continuation of the same like chronological, so it's kind of the overall story within this world is progressing with these duologies. So because this is so interconnected with the events that took place in the first duology, I won't talk too much about this one, but it follows a side character from the main duology, and basically the premise of this world is, in the first book, we follow a human who enters herself into this competition, and she lives in the world that is kind of run by vampires. And if she ends up winning this competition, the goddess will grant her a wish. But there's a lot of political intrigue and division between, vampires and humans and the other, like, vampire kingdom. So there's a lot of political intrigue in addition to some of the, like, conflict that arises between humans and vampires. So it's very interesting, and this again follows a side character. The first book in this duology ended on such a big cliffhanger that I'm very excited to see what happens next. So I'm excited to dive into this one. And lastly, this is a book that just seems really unique and intriguing, and I'm excited to dive in, and it is Wild Reverence by Rebecca Ross. I don't know if this is a series or just a standalone, I don't know, but I'm interested to dive in. But it says, born in the firelit domain of the Underrealm, Matilda is the youngest goddess of her clan. Blessed with humble messenger magic she uses to carry words and letters through the realms, but the gods will kill for power, and Matilda holds a secret she must hide from even her dearest allies. And there is a mortal who dreams of her, though they have never met in the waking world. 10 years ago, Vincent wrote to Matilda on the darkest night of his life, begging the goddess he befriended in dreams to help him. His request went unanswered, and Vincent became a hardened lord of the river who had long forgotten Matilda, until she comes tumbling into his bedroom window with a letter for him. Matilda and Vincent are fated to find each other beyond dreams, but to rewrite the blood-soaked ways of the gods, Matilda will have to face something she fears even more than losing her magic, finally allowing herself to be loved. I know this is kind of romantic-y based, so I'm really excited to see I see how I feel about it, and it just seems really interesting and unique, so I'm very curious to see how I feel about this one. So that's it, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments below what some of the books that you read this January were and those that you're looking forward to read in February. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and I will see you guys next time. Bye, guys.